My name is Harold Whitmore. I'm 68 years old and suffer from chronic kidney failure. Once a proud engineer, I now struggle to walk across a room without gasping for breath. But that pain is nothing compared to what my own son did to me. You read the title? Yes, he sold my organs, my own flesh and blood. When the operating light flicked on, what it revealed made even death pause. I'm telling this story not because I want pity, but because the truth is the only thing I have left. I want you to hear every damn word before they try to bury it again. It started with a cough that wouldn't quit. Doctors called it renal failure. Dialysis became my lifeline. My wife, God rest her soul, died 2 winters ago, and since then I lived with my only son, Derek. He was 32, sharp-dressed, all smiles, and drowning in debt from what I later learned was crypto gambling and pills. I was too tired to see the warning signs. At first he cooked me meals, changed my IV, helped me with the wheelchair. I thought maybe I raised him right after all. But kindness turned cold fast. One day I asked him if he could help me into the bath. He muttered under his breath, "Why don't you just rot already?" I laughed, thinking he was joking, but then he looked me dead in the eyes and said it again louder, "You're nothing but dead weight." My chest tightened. It wasn't just the kidney disease, it was heartbreak. I wanted to believe it was stress, that maybe he'd lost his job or had a bad day. But in the days that followed, his behavior grew darker. He began locking my door at night. He whispered to people over the phone when he thought I was asleep. And worst of all, he started collecting all my medications, saying I was on too many and he'd handle it. The food portions got smaller. Sometimes there wasn't any food at all. I was losing weight fast. One night I heard him talking on the phone in the hallway. I'll never forget what he said. "Yeah, he's almost ready. Just a few more days. I'll have the paperwork signed by Friday. No complications." No complications. That night I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and felt the truth creeping in like mold on wet walls. I wasn't being cared for. I was being harvested. The locks were no longer just on my door. They were on the refrigerator, the windows, and even the cabinet that held my medical records. My world shrank to a single bedroom and a bathroom, both of which required my son's permission to access. Every time I asked a question, Derek gave me a tired smile and said, "Don't worry about it, Dad. You're safe here." Safe. What a cruel word. I began noticing strangers coming in and out of the house, men in suits, women with clipboards. They never looked me in the eye. Once a woman with red hair stood just inside my doorway and scribbled something in her notebook. When I asked who she was, Derek shut the door and turned the lock. "She's with the insurance company," he snapped. "Let me handle it." Insurance, I hadn't paid a premium in years. My benefits had run dry. Whatever she was there for, it wasn't my health. I tried calling for help, but my phone had been taken away. Derek said it was too distracting. I asked him to call Dr. Hines, the kidney specialist I'd been seeing for 6 years. He promised he would. But days passed, then weeks, and I never heard from Dr. Hines again. I didn't even know if the man was alive. I was slowly starving physically and emotionally. I'd spend hours staring out the window watching squirrels bury acorns while I tried to recall the last time someone touched me with genuine care. I remember once reaching for my son's hand, and he jerked away like I was poison. Then came the night it all turned. I woke up to the sound of rubber wheels and ambulance. Derek walked into my room, already dressed, his face unreadable. "Dad," he said, "you're going to a new place. A clinic that specializes in people like you. They'll help you better than I ever could." I asked where. He said nothing. Just wheeled me into the living room where 2 large men waited with a stretcher. No sirens, no badges. One of them patted my shoulder with a gloved hand. "You'll be in and out. Piece of cake," he said. I tried to resist, but I didn't have the strength. I felt the IV get ripped from my arm. My skin was cold and damp from fear. Derek signed a clipboard without reading it. Then he leaned down close and whispered, "This is your purpose now. Try not to die before they cut." I screamed, but they had already strapped me down. The van didn't look like a real ambulance. No flashing lights, no markings. Just metal walls, no windows, and the cold hum of something electric behind my head. The 2 men riding with me didn't speak. They didn't offer painkillers, water, or answers, only glances that said, "You're already dead." When we arrived, I saw no sign, no receptionist, no patients. Just a steel door that slid open with a buzz like a vault in some underground facility. Fluorescent lights flickered above as they wheeled me through a narrow corridor that reeked of bleach and despair. I heard whispers, someone laughing softly, and the muffled beep of a heart monitor. That was the last sound before the anesthesia mask came down. The last thing I saw before everything went black was a surgical light above my head, round and glowing like a full moon before a massacre. But I didn't fade into unconsciousness as smoothly as they expected. Something in my body rebelled. Maybe it was the sheer terror. Maybe it was the unfinished story inside me refusing to end. Whatever it was, I was still half awake. Paralyzed, unable to scream, but my mind was wide open and my eyes, God, my eyes could still see. I heard voices. 3 of them. One said, "His vitals are dropping, but the kidneys are still intact." Another, cold and clinical, replied, "We'll start with the liver. Keep it quiet." But it was the third voice that froze my blood. I knew it. Knew the slight rasp, the sarcasm, the voice that used to say, "Good night, Dad," in my doorway. "Derek, I told you he's clean," Derek said. "No history of drugs, non-smoker, no cancer. It's a gold mine, and he's too weak to make noise." He laughed. "Besides, even if he does, who's going to believe some half-dead old man?" I wanted to scream. My jaw wouldn't move. My body was locked, useless. Then the light shifted slightly, just enough for me to catch a glimpse of Derek's face behind a surgical mask. He was watching. Not in concern, in greed. They had suited him up. He wasn't just handing me off, he was participating. My son wasn't a victim of debt, he was the surgeon's assistant. And I, his father, was just a slab of meat on a table. I must have blacked out again because when I awoke it was no longer in the sterile silence of an operating room. I was in a dim hospital room, bare with only one flickering light and a curtain half drawn around my bed. My chest throbbed. My side ached. I tried to move, and pain lashed through my abdomen like fire. Something had been done. Something invasive. Then I heard a voice, soft female, maybe in her 20s. "Sir, you're awake." Oh, God. I turned slightly. A nurse stood near the IV drip, her eyes wide with panic. She wasn't supposed to see me like this. She muttered, "They said you'd be under for another day." Her name tag read Claire. She looked around nervously and leaned in. I shouldn't tell you this, but they didn't even log your name in the patient records. You're not supposed to exist here." I stared at her, blinking hard, my dry lips barely forming the words. "My son, Derek." Claire flinched. Then she nodded slowly, shame in her eyes. He's working with them. These people, they pay families to hand over sick relatives. They run organ optimization trials. That's what they call it. But it's illegal, off the books. You weren't supposed to survive." She reached into her scrubs and pulled out a phone. Scrolled. Showed me a message from a private chat. It read, "Derek W. The old man's kidneys prepped. Just keep him alive till Monday. The rest is yours." I couldn't breathe. My own son had scheduled my death. Claire squeezed my arm. "They'll notice I'm in here. I'll help get you out. But we have to move now." She returned hours later with a wheelchair and a change of clothes. She whispered, "I disabled the cameras in this wing. We have 15 minutes. The hallway was long, the elevator slow. Every beep, every creak of the wheels felt like a countdown to a bullet. But somehow we slipped out. She drove me to a motel 2 towns over, paid in cash. I barely stayed conscious. She gave me painkillers, water, and something I hadn't felt in months, dignity. That night, as I lay on the cheap mattress in agony, I stared at the ceiling and thought about what Derek had said under that surgical light. No one will believe him. I didn't need them to believe me. I just needed them to see what he'd become. I spent 2 weeks recovering in that motel. Every breath hurt. My abdomen was stitched together with jagged scars, but none deeper than the one Derek left in my soul. Claire stayed in touch through burner phones and dropped off groceries. She wasn't just a nurse. She was a whistleblower in waiting, terrified yet unwilling to stay silent. She brought me everything I needed to prove what had happened. Derek's message logs, unlicensed surgical consent forms with forged signatures, Photos of the clinic, which turned out to be an old veterinary facility with illegal retrofitting. Most damning of all, audio recordings of Derek and the surgeons laughing about splitting the profit from my organs. But if I walked into the police with a story like this, they'd label me senile, delusional, or worse. I was a sick old man with no credibility. I needed a spotlight bigger than a courtroom. I contacted a local investigative journalist, Ruth Langley. Her channel had exposed nursing home abuse and corporate medical fraud. When she met me, I could see the skepticism in her eyes until I showed her the evidence. She took one look at the surgical documents and whispered, "Jesus." Within a week, Ruth published a video titled "Son Sells Father for Organs, the Illegal Harvesting Industry Nobody Talks About." My face was blurred, but Derek's wasn't. Nor were the texts, the facility photos, or the clip of his voice saying, "The old man's practically begging to die." The video exploded. 12 million views in 4 days. Police raided the facility within a week. They found blood-soaked equipment, unlicensed anesthetics, and 5 other patients half-conscious tied to gurneys. Derek wasn't there. He had run, but not far. Ruth received a tip that he'd fled to a hotel under a fake name in another state. The police were waiting. They dragged him out in cuffs. When asked by reporters why he did it, Derek smiled and said, "Why waste something broken?" It made national headlines. In court, I testified via video. My body couldn't handle the trip, but my voice was strong enough. Derek wouldn't look at the screen. Maybe out of guilt. Maybe because he knew what I saw under that surgical light would haunt him forever. He was sentenced to 45 years in prison, but justice came at a price. I would never fully recover. A chunk of my liver was gone. My health, fragile as it was, had been pushed to the edge. Still, I was alive, and people had seen the truth. I don't know how many nights I sat by the motel window staring at nothing, wondering how a boy I once rocked to sleep could hand me over like scrap metal. Derek used to draw pictures of us in his elementary notebooks, him holding my hand me with a big smile and a toolbox in the other. He said I was his hero. Now he's a felon, a butcher, and I'm a survivor barely stitched together by someone else's mercy. Claire testified anonymously. Her courage helped take down not just that illegal facility, but 3 others tied to the same black market organ ring. She moved away after the trial, fearing retaliation. But before she left, she visited me one last time. "You lived," she said, pressing my hand. "That's more than they expected." I smiled with tears in my eyes. "That's more than I expected." With the compensation I received from the state after months of battling through bureaucratic brick walls, I was able to move into a small assisted living apartment. Nothing fancy, but the nurses call me Mr. Whitmore with warmth. They say I'm an inspiration. I say I'm just what's left after betrayal. I still have nightmares. Sometimes I wake up gasping, sure I'm back under that surgical light, Derek's shadow looming behind the mask. But other nights, I dream of exposing him, of that moment on TV when millions saw my son's evil and I finally took back control. They let me speak to him once. A video call. He looked older, colder. He just stared at the screen. I asked him, "Why Derek, why me?" His reply, "You were already dying, Dad. I just sped it up." I ended the call. Not because I was angry, but because I realized something cruel. Derek wasn't a monster. He was something worse. He was empty. He'd hollowed out every human part of himself long before he ever tried to take mine. Now when I see families on the news hugging their elders, crying when they pass, I wonder what it's like to have a child who died to save you. Mine almost did the opposite, but I am still here, still breathing, still warning the world what happens when greed finds a scalpel. If you've made it to the end of my story, thank you. I'm not sharing this for revenge anymore, but as a caution. Trust is precious. Life is fragile. Illness will test the people around you in ways you never imagined. Some will rise, others will crumble. But you must fight to be seen, heard, and protected, no matter your age or condition. Never suffer in silence. If something feels wrong, speak up. If someone treats your illness as a burden, not a bond, get help. And if you ever feel forgotten, remember this: you matter. Your story matters. And sometimes the light they turn on to carve you open might just reveal a truth they never wanted exposed.